I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the WiLD Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. So, who among us doesn't want to know ourselves better and be known? It's why it is so powerful when someone sees us to our core. Someone looks us in the eye and says, I see you. To know ourselves and be known by others, that is our gut. To trust our gut is to know ourselves, our role, and our expertise. Every person is asking this question in some form and likely in their own words. Do I trust that voice deep inside of me, nudging me in a certain direction, or to say a certain thing, or to make this or that choice? Or do I move against the grain of my gut because I'm not quite sure it's true? I don't know what you see out there in the world today that is the most common message, but what I see so often is some form of simply trust your gut. Be yourself. Be who you are. Listen to that inner voice. Whatever it says is who you are and what you should do, regardless of the needs and expectations of others. The common and loud voice in culture is to be yourself and live your truth, no matter the cost, and listen to that inner voice. But how do we know if that inner voice is speaking truth to us or not? And for me, as a leader and as a human being, this is personal. I lead an organization and a team that has been in an important and necessary transitional moment. And like any effective organization, we've gone through different seasons of growth, of shifting, and of strategic focusing. And as many of you know, WiLD Leaders has been in a serious strategic moment, developing version 3 of our WiLD toolkit and our WiLD Trust platform. Team members with growing families, deaths in our families, and an incredible process of change and intentional decisions to ensure healthy growth to the best of our abilities. And as a leader, this has required major shifts in my role and even my perceptions and definition of who I am related to that role and to the team of people that I lead. It's just a fact. To grow, I have to delegate. I've had to delegate decision-making authority and to figure out where my convictions still must be involved, and even the sacred cows that will remain sacred at the core of our mission. I've had to make dozens of decisions and trust that I have enough data to believe that my past experience is wisdom and not reactivity, or not just a self-preserving opinion. And it just so happens that moments of movement and growth, similar to moments of decreasing or diminishing, require us to up our decision-making game, because decisions always involve both logic and intuition. Let me say that again. Decisions always involve both logic and intuition. Logic invites an openness to external data that will either confirm or disconfirm our decisions and beliefs, and our intuition, our gut, nudges us to follow a feeling that is often based on what we've experienced in the past and the influences on our identity. So for me personally, this season has caused me to ask that question of whether or not I can trust my gut on a daily basis, or at least every other day I'm asking that question. Can you relate to that? I sure hope so, because if you can, I'm not alone. And my gut tells me I'm not, because the data suggests otherwise. And this question of when and how to trust our gut is both empowering and humbling. This simple question, can I trust my gut, contains pieces of our identity, our value, our experience, our humanity, our deepest desires, our relationships, and our convictions. It is so near to the core of who we are that it will put you on your knees when you take a moment to consider all that you're asking yourself in that moment. And as leaders, our gut has more at stake than our identity. It carries with it the burden of our responsibility for others, their well-being and their performance, and even their financial stability. 3 connected pieces of a person's experience that give them a sense of wholeness and health and progress. And as leaders, we hold that. So our knowing how and when to trust our gut is absolutely critical. So what is a decision that you're facing that's causing you to live in that space between trusting your gut and remaining open to the possibility that you might be wrong, or to other logic? It may be a decision you have to make, a communication with your team regarding something mission critical in your organization, or it might even be a conversation with a loved one where you're having to decide whether you will take a stand for what you think is important to say or communicate, and also, or possibly to remain silent to hear someone else. And when you think of moments where you had to trust your gut, or situations you're currently facing like these, what is the common factor in these moments that we've all experienced? These are the moments where we're having to put our faith and trust in things we're feeling about situations. And those feelings are often not as simple as knowing exactly the right answer. Trusting our gut is more complicated than that, because we all have also had experiences where what our gut was telling us was actually off the mark or straight out wrong. And that reality that our gut is not always right is what makes leadership, being human, and working toward wholeness, whether it's our teams or at home, so much more interesting, but nonetheless heart-wrenching and sleep depriving at times. And I want to offer a few things to think about that may help the next time you're facing a decision or listening for wisdom regarding what to do or how to think. And these principles are not designed to tell you what to do, but to inform you better so that you can trust your gut more effectively or know when to listen to what you feel deep down. And as I share these principles with you, here's what they have in common that tells us something about our basic psychology as human beings that informs our leadership, our lives, and our progress toward feeling better and performing better. What each of these principles share, and the research behind them confirms, is that human beings are both feeling and thinking, a combination of intuition and logic. And when we deny one over the other, we lack the most important resource of all for decision making, and that resource is wisdom. So, number one is this: your brain and your gut are connected. Did you know that there is actually a literal connection between your gut and your brain? In fact, there are more neurons in your gut than there are in your spinal cord. A knot in your stomach as you're contemplating decisions is not only something that can make you sick to your stomach, but it provides information to the brain that can impede or inform your logic about a situation. And here is the real story of our guts. Our guts are wild and dangerous places. It is one of the most misunderstood parts of our entire body, but it is also necessary because it is the place that turns fuel into energy and transitions the leftover into waste. It's one of the reasons there are major questions about the effectiveness of the growing probiotic industry. Some research suggests that taking oral probiotics is the equivalent of putting a common house cat in the middle of a jungle and expecting it to live. There is research that suggests that the gut is so wild that probiotics do little to impact long-term gut health. And notice I say suggest, as research must continue. Logic says that, and it demands it. It isn't something that we don't like to talk about in normal conversations because it's a little gross, like keep the mystery under wraps. But if we don't understand it, literally our gut health, we miss out on knowing one of the key drivers of not only our overall health, but the overall functioning of our bodies. And in the same way, our gut, psychologically speaking, is a powerful and mysterious and wild and dangerous place within us that is rarely understood well without a level of intention. A bit of logic applied to the gut moves a heartfelt desire into wisdom. And trusting our gut involves more than just believing what we feel at face value. We will trust ourselves better with more data on the table. But like the invisible gut between our neck and our waist, we have to stop to take a look at who we are, what we've experienced, where we're skilled, what drives us, and why we're here. And when we begin to build on those basic pieces of our psychology and functioning, we begin to understand how the different parts of our psychological gut are functioning together to produce forward progress, decisions, and what to discard as waste. And number two, our personalities are both intuition and logic. Our personalities are both intuition and logic. While we all have a heavier default one way or the other as either more sensing or more intuitive, each of us contains both. Our personality, the most unchanging part of who we are, has the seeds of both logic and feeling. Isn't that incredible? It's not something to deny, but to embrace the both and in who we are as people, as leaders, and as team members. Jung contended that there are two ways of perceiving the information that we are continually absorbing. And some of us are more sensing with a preference toward what we see as literal and concrete, while the more intuitive among us prefer abstract possibilities and feelings based on trusting our guts. The common factor between those of us who trust our guts and are more intuitive versus those of us who are more analytical is that we are both human and will likely apply certain biases like to whatever it is that we're perceiving, no matter what data we have. The problem with trusting our gut is that our gut is usually based on intuition as much as it is logic, and our intuition and our perceptions are profoundly shaped by bias. And bias isn't all bad, as it also allows us to appropriately discriminate between different options. But it can be quite bad because our intuition is often based on an incomplete understanding of our past experiences, as well as the self-serving bias that we all have. And each of those can inappropriately fill in the blanks of our current perspective on reality and be based on blind spots as opposed to a closer identification with the actual truth. Which leads me to number 3. Our guts are often not right. And here's an example. When it comes to empathy, research suggests that most people believe that intuition is a better guide than systematic thinking to accurately infer another's thoughts and feelings. Research also strongly suggests that the opposite is actually true. Like these are common studies of actual managers and professionals. Common assumptions about what results in empathy differ from the empirical evidence. Across a broad range of situations, it has been shown that an intentional and effortful mindset is associated with empathic accuracy, like understanding what other people are feeling and thinking accurately. On a larger scale, the many US federal programs that assume intuition is the key need to include intention and more nuanced approaches to ensure a deeper understanding and practice of empathy. In short, if we are just going with our gut, we will be off. And then number 4, opinions are not convictions. The word conviction is rooted in the word elencho, which means to cross-examine. Therefore, a position, something you state or believe that has failed to be cross-examined and questioned, is not a conviction at all, but simply an opinion. A conviction from the deepest and most trusted levels of our gut has been challenged by us and others and will continue to be challenged to see if it holds up in the face of all the facts. A conviction is tested and tested again, and there's nothing wrong with that. So based on those principles and everything I've just described, what are we to do if we're to trust our gut? And as we've discussed, trust is an inherently relational thing. Trust is most often experienced as something between us and another, and it has layers in our organizational life and life in general. And what's interesting about trust from the perspective of trusting our gut is, imagine a conversation between your logic and your feeling that's occurring within each of us. There is trust in leaders, trust in our teams, trust in our organizations, and there are certain factors that build trust that we've discussed in previous weeks. And for today, what are the prebiotics, if you will, that will help us build whole trust in our gut? And here they are. Number 1 is to know your default and engage the other half. If you're more intuitive and make decisions by following your gut, make sure it's informed by listening and looking for more data that both confirms or possibly denies what your gut is telling you. If you are more analytical, take the courageous move to understand what you are feeling and why, because even analytical types are feeling things. Oftentimes, they're just more likely to deny those feelings are there or to let people in. Number 2, open the context window wider. In the AI world, an AI platform is only as effective as how open the context window is. In other words, the more data available to the platform to create solutions, the more we can trust its output. And the same is true for trusting our gut. Open your context window to see yourself more clearly and get your own perspective dialed in along with data from others. Number 3, test your gut. Put your opinions out there and let others test them. If you catch flack, it may not mean that you are wrong, but that may mean that you're over the target. In fact, resistance is an important measure of the right thing oftentimes. Too little resistance in the face of a courageous move, and you might need to face the reality that people are afraid to challenge your gut. Too much, and you may be off. The goal isn't to gain consensus, but you must have a critical core who agree with you if you're to trust your gut. And then number 4, you cannot trust a gut that you don't know. Direction, clarity, and specificity matter. And let me give you an example. How much more would you trust your gut, and how much more would others trust you if you knew yourself and you knew your job? If you're like me, the answer is so much more. And for some, this becomes very clear, and that clarity shows. For a professional tennis player, as an example, Their job is to play and win tennis matches. And if you know professional tennis players have competed that way, as I have, there's a lot more going on than just playing and winning tennis matches. I get that. But it's nice if you know that's the job, to play and win tennis matches. At least that's the core. And the sooner that they understand the core job, the sooner they will manage the rest of the roles they play more effectively. They'll know what swing to work on. They'll know what to practice and what to get better at. For another example, for a lead singer of a band, their job is to be the lead singer. And as they know themselves better, they will know what kind of lead singer that they are. If they're a lead singer of a rock band, then be that. If it's rap or hip hop, then be that. And not all rap artists have the same role or do it the same way. That's where the nuance begins. And if we know ourselves and our role, trusting our gut is so much easier. So what is your court or your stage? What is your profession? That thing to which you are called and the place you are to serve in this season? Why are you here? What skills come easy to you? And what skills must you sharpen to perform well in your role? Because these things change. Our roles change depending upon the needs of our teams and where our organizations are going. Who must be around you? Where have you come from? Who do you serve? What drives you? And what are you like when you are driven and motivated? Understanding these things. What is your professional stage? And maybe what must you sacrifice to serve well? Because knowing ourselves and our role increases the depth of trust that we can have in our gut. So, with all of that, let's keep this wild conversation going.